before I get this video started, don't get me wrong, I really do like Battlefield 1. You'll see at the end I still rate it a 7.5 out of 10, but this is really just the negatives and what I think need to be changed in the game. Hey guys, so Jane here from LazerGaming. This video, I'm sort of reviewing Battlefield 1 in its alpha stage. I know this isn't a full review, this is more just feedback on the closed alpha, what I think needs to be changed. I've put a lot of this already into the community forums on the Battlefield 1 website. Now, it's not really the website, it's just a forum the people who were in the closed alpha were given, but these are really just my closed alpha thoughts and if Battlefield 1's good. So I'll tell you my out of 10 rating at the end of this video. I don't want to say it right away. I sort of want to give you background, what I think about the game so far, and then I'll tell you my rating. So these are just some of the big issues in my opinion. So I'm just going to start off with the Zeppelin right away. I know this might not be like all Behemoth vehicles, but I'm assuming this is going to be on at least 2 or 3 maps in the game. And what the Zeppelin is a cool mechanic, how it changes the maps, that's a really cool mechanic. How when it falls, it completely changes the map. Okay, well maybe completely changes an objective is a better way to say it, but it usually only falls with 1 to 2 minutes left in the game, which often has a very minor effect on combat. Now, while a lot of people really did hate the Levolution in Battlefield 4, it did seem to change up the map and really give the second half of the game a huge difference compared to the first half of the game. And when the Zeppelin only falls with 1 to 2 minutes left in the game, it really just honestly doesn't make a huge effect on the battlefield. I feel like it should fall when the game is either 2/3 or 3/4 over, because I know it really depends on if your team decides to shoot it down, and while that'll probably come with time as players get more used to the Zeppelin, they'll try to shoot it down more. But ultimately, I really don't find that it falls early enough and doesn't impact the battlefield enough for something that is such a cool feature. Now that really leads into another part of the game, is Conquest. At least the games are way too short. Games were around 10-15 minutes, which I honestly didn't like. I mean, if I wanted to play a quick game, I'd play Hop on Domination, maybe Rush. Even Conquest Small could be a shorter game mode, but Conquest Large, I feel like the game should be 20 to 25 minutes like they always have been in Battlefield. Obviously, I'm just going to say this right now. If you guys agree with anything I'm saying, leave it down below in the comments. I really want to hear what you guys think, and if your feedback is really great, I might make another video on this, talking about it and reviewing your feedback overall. But yeah, Conquest games are way too short in my opinion. I honestly didn't get to play Domination too much. There were almost never any servers running on Xbox. There was one server, I think, and it almost always only had like 6 people in it, which just really wasn't worth joining. And obviously the game's not going to go as fast as 6 people, so I couldn't really tell how that played out. But for Conquest, I'd say the game moved a bit too quickly. Next, the sustained fire mechanic on LMGs makes it hard to pick people off head glitches. That's just what I wrote down. I was writing these down throughout the entire thing, but I probably just got frustrated because I honestly just couldn't hit a guy on a head glitch. But I really need to go more in depth into that issue. So the sustained fire mechanic on LMGs, basically for those of you who don't know, what it means is that if you're using an LMG, your first few shots will not be accurate. Your spread will be at the highest on your first few shots, which means even if you're directly on target, you probably will not hit the enemy, which is just stupid in my opinion, and flat out unrealistic. I mean, I know this game isn't the most realistic game, but at least try to keep the gun combat realistic. In real life, the longer you shoot an LMG, the more it overheats, the harder it gets to control recoil, but in this game, the longer you shoot an LMG, the more accurate it gets. Well, it sounds good in theory because LMGs are meant to put down cover for your teammates and make it easy for your teammates to push up onto an objective, because an LMG or a support player is supporting your teammate through that objective. However, what this really just turns into is support players sitting on hills 100 meters back and constantly shooting you. And with the suppression mechanic in the game that makes it so it's really hard to even pick them off at that range, you honestly just have to run inside. And it's just really frustrating because they're really hard to fight against, and the mechanic overall just isn't very good because it supports camping at long range, and at the same time, you're supposed to tap fire weapons. Pretty much every other gun in the game, you should be tap firing, but this weapon is just different. LMGs are different, and you can't tap fire them. It's so weird to think that if you tap fire them, you'll do worse. It honestly seems like this game's trying to make LMGs take less skill than previously, which honestly could work out good or bad, because I feel like most competent players honestly would just play Assault, and by making LMGs easy to use, I guess they could attract a more noob crowd to that. But honestly, I just don't think it's a good mechanic as a whole, and you really shouldn't cater your game to work like that. Another issue, this is more of just a bug, the hitbox for bayonet charges should be a bit bigger. Often even if you're right next to the opponent, if he strafes even slightly and you were on target to hit him in the arm, it'll just run right by him, and you can't stop with the bayonet charge, so you'll just keep running away. And you've probably seen that clip a couple times where, on my channel, I've showed it a few times, where I was shooting at an enemy, he came, and it looked like he bayonet charged right through me and just kept running in a circle. It was pretty funny, but it's frustrating when you're on the other end. At least on Xbox, I got some major frame drops down to just 0 frames per second, where it just wouldn't move. It's not like it was lagging, everything else stopped. The entire screen just stopped, and then it would continue and I'd be in the exact same spot. It's pretty weird at times, it never really killed me, but it was a little weird. Now, I'm going to talk about the medic class next. I feel like the medic class should be a bit stronger. Most people are still playing Assault because of how strong the tanks are, because they arguably have the best weapons with the SMGs, at least in close quarters, but they seem to work pretty well in most situations, especially since the spread on most other guns is so large at long range. You can just do really well with an Assault class weapon, and it was honestly probably my highest scoring class overall at all the other classes. And really, the medics, the semi-autos, do not perform like accurate marksman's rifles. They have a large spread at medium range, and an LMG will beat it almost every single time. I can see what they're trying to do with the medic class, because it doesn't have great weapons. They wanted to sort of balance it out by giving the best gadgets to a class that doesn't necessarily have the best weapons. But at the same time, in Battlefield 4, I felt like I was constantly being revived by medics because everyone was using it, because they had the best weapons. So it's really hard to find a balance, because the medic is arguably the most important class in the game. However, with weaker weapons, people aren't going to be using it. I say maybe just buff the spread on some of them. I felt the Chai Rigotti was probably the best one, and it felt pretty good at long range, but the M1907 SL was just not very good at all, and I feel like they just need to get a buff on their spread so that their spread increases lower and you can actually use them at long range. I feel like the tanks need a bit of rebalancing because the FT-17 tank is a bit too powerful. That's just my personal opinion, because while in the alpha people could work together as a team often, because the majority of people who were playing were maybe YouTubers who could squad up with other people, and there was really good communication within the closed alpha. Once the full game comes, there's going to be a lot of people who just want to hop on and play a game. And if they're getting into one of the heavy tanks where it really requires teamwork to do well in it, or even the land ship, they're just not going to do well, because any solo player in the FT-17 can kill most of the heavy tanks, because the FT-17 moves faster, and with the rotating turret it can perform extremely well. And especially considering the fact that the FT-17's damage isn't that much lower. I wouldn't say necessarily nerf the FT-17's damage, but maybe just increase the heavy tank's damage slightly, or give it a slightly larger field of view. I know it might not be as realistic, but as I've stated with previous mechanics in this game, it's not that realistic overall anyway, so it wouldn't hurt that much to give it a slightly larger field of view. I'm talking about the main cannon here, because that's really where your tank's going to do the majority of its big damage. Now, with all that being said, I'd probably give this game a 7.5 out of 10 in its current state in an alpha, which is pretty good. What I really liked is they've cut down on a lot of the bugs that we've seen in Battlefield games in betas and alphas. This alpha really had minimal bugs, which was really good sign. But ultimately, mechanics like the LMG mechanic, and the fact that snipers, you can't set them to 0 meters zeroing. I agree that maybe you want to set a sniper's zeroing to 75 meters as the default, but the fact that developers aren't even giving us the option to set it to 0 meters is just extremely annoying, because you get used to previous Battlefield games where you actually had to aim above the enemy's head, and that required more skill. It seems like this game in a lot of situations, at least on console it felt like this, they're trying to remove the skill from the game. And while it seems like a fun and good game overall, and again, we only saw one map, it is alpha, so everything could change. They could bring in really overpowered weapons and stuff, but the time to kill overall felt slow, which I personally didn't like. I didn't mind it. I got used to it by the end of the alpha. But just certain things with this game that just make it a little frustrating, because on one hand they're trying to be realistic because it's a World War I shooter, and they say they're trying to be realistic. I'm fine if it's an unrealistic World War I shooter, where it ultimately is, but I got in an argument with a developer about the zeroing mechanic. I said, why can't we have it set to 0 meters? He said, because no sniper would realistically set their sniper to 0 meters, because they're not going to want to hit somebody up close. But I was like, can you just give us the option to set it to 0 meters? And he just kept saying, no, we can't. And ultimately, it's just stuff like that that kind of bugs me about this game. That developers, while it is a closed alpha, they weren't necessarily trying to take a ton of feedback, which kind of bugged me overall. And I hope that we'll see some changes, and if there is overwhelming feedback in the beta, it will ultimately change some of this stuff. But Battlefield 1 right now, I feel it's a bit too overhyped, and developers are thinking that they've made a perfect game because everyone's saying they love it. We love Battlefield 1 no matter what. But once it hits the mainstream crowd, people who aren't hyped, people who don't really care what the build-up was for this game, they'll ultimately see where a lot of these mechanics might get frustrating and annoying, because people who use guns regularly will tap fire. People in real life know that you should tap fire, and if they hop on and try to use one of these guns, they're just gonna be like, why the heck aren't my shots hitting? I don't like this game. And ultimately, yeah, that's my thoughts on the Battlefield 1 alpha. I know it was a bit all over the place. I just sort of wanted to get these out to you guys in the video. Tell me you guys want from Battlefield 1 videos down below in the comment section, and drop a like on the video. Leave your feedback on the Battlefield 1 alpha and my thoughts. But that's what it is for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.